Everything will be revealed, President Donald Trump said as he signed the executive orders ordering the release of the John F. Kennedy files, the Robert Kennedy files, and the Martin Luther King assassination files. Now, these three sensational assassinations in the United States, all in a 5-year span between 1963 and 1968, altered the course of American history and politics. And more importantly, it caused lingering suspicion about who actually killed these iconic politicians. Most Americans, for instance, still refuse to believe that JFK was killed by a single assassin. But why has the world's oldest democracy been sitting on these files for more than half a century? And what can we expect now from these files? Joining me to discuss this are Ambassador Deepak Vora and Iqbal Malhotra. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. Ambassador Vora, 60 years nearly since John F. Kennedy's assassination, and there are still lingering questions about his assassination. Most Americans don't believe that there was a lone gunman. They believe there was a huge conspiracy of malevolent forces that got together and killed John F. Kennedy. Decode for us the significance of this move. Trump, in his first presidency, said there was you couldn't declassify the files because it was very sensitive. But in his second term, he seems to have gone ahead and said, let's do it. Let's open the files to the public.
Now, you asked a very interesting question that what has changed between Trump 1 and Trump 2.
Yes.
Very quickly, by way of background, a friend of mine in Columbia University has told me that the US government spends between 18 and 20 billion, B-I-L-L-I-O-N, 9 zeros, US dollars every year to keep it secrets, and 3,000 federal government employees. What will be confidential, secret, top secret, what will not.
Yes.
And 0.5% of that budget is spent on declassifying documents. So you can understand that it's a country that is obsessed with secrecy. Very good. Wartime. But in this particular case, John F. Kennedy in the early 60s, I recall, I was a kid, you were not even born, when he was assassinated. I remember that even then there was talk that they are not telling the truth. There was a chap called Jack Ruby, then he got shot. Similarly with Robert F. Kennedy, there were a lot of questions. And then Martin Luther King, sir, I have no hesitation today in telling you that his widow, Coretta Scott King, I knew her well. We were walking in Atlanta, I'm talking about the early 80s, and I said, Your Excellency, I called her Your Excellency for some reason. I said, Your Excellency, do you believe that what happened to your revered husband was what is being made out to be? She said, not at all, and I don't intend to talk about it further. So that obviously she too didn't believe the kind of nonsense that was being fed to her by the American federal agency. Now, what is, I believe, that that 3 attempts were made, alleged attempts, actually attempts were made on Donald Trump's life during the election campaign. Obviously, the Secret Service didn't do its best to protect him. Plus, what he calls the deep state, which I prefer to call the dark state, because it goes all the way up to the president, up to the top. The dark state blocked every attempt that he made, or that when he was trying to become president of the United States, they played all kinds of dirty games with him. Releasing this document, selectively that. He doesn't like them at all. So he wants to dismantle them. He wants to let the American people know that, look, you're being had. I was had by these guys, and I now intend to extract their teeth so they can't bite anymore. There are thousands of these secrets lying in files. Trump's idea is, you guys hurt me, now I'm going to teach you a lesson, and I have the power to.
That's a fascinating analysis, Ambassador Deepak Vora. The fact that Trump is actually going after the deep state, and from what we are reading now, it seems that the CIA is the one that could actually be discredited by the revelation of all these documents, because the last bunch of files is believed to deal with the CIA. But I want to go over to Iqbal Malhotra. Iqbal, you're a filmmaker, and it's very interesting that the JFK assassination theories were revived by the Oliver Stone movie, JFK in 1991, where the US actually started bringing together all these files of the JFK assassination and then brought in that classification policy and said that by 2017 they have to be declassified. What explains this change of mind that Trump has had, as Ambassador Vora is saying, that he's actually going back at the deep state, getting back for all those assassination attempts that he seems to have survived, and which a large number of Trump acolytes believe was the work of the deep state. What are your thoughts, Iqbal?
I disagree with this point of view because Trump has extended an olive branch to President Putin yesterday or day before.
Right.
And he has adopted, in fact, a carrot and stick approach. He said that if you end the Ukraine war, then
Yes.
I will help you in becoming a great economy once again, because he believes that the Russian economy is under extreme economic pressure. In
Yes.
fact, US has just sanctioned 143 very large crude carriers which were carrying Russian oil to China and India, and they have debarred those ships from seeking anchorage in any port
Yes.
or getting insurance cover.
Right.
So what Trump really wants to do is that he wants to push Putin into a corner. Now, the issue about the JFK assassination is
Yes.
that even though the Warren Commission of Inquiry
Yes.
came to the conclusion that Oswald, the assassin, acted on his own, but three questions remain.
Right.
Did Oswald act on his own? Did Oswald act on behalf of the KGB?
Yes.
Or did Oswald act on behalf of organized crime?
Right.
Now, you know that 2 years before John F. Kennedy's assassination, there was the famous Bay of Pigs fiasco. And then
Yes.
a year before that, in 1962, before the assassination, there was the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Yes.
which caused President Khrushchev a lot of humiliation. Now the thing is that I don't remember if he was president or he was general secretary of the Communist Party, but I think he was probably general secretary of the Communist Party at that time. But the thing is that Oswald had, in fact, emigrated to the Soviet Union in
Yes.
1959.
He had
And
defected and then he came back.
he
Yes.
spent 3 years there.
Yes.
And 2 months before Kennedy's assassination, he had gone to Mexico, and from there he went to the Cuban embassy.
Right.
And he tried to get a visa to go to Cuba. And he told the Cuban embassy that he wanted a transit visa because he wanted to go back to the Soviet Union.
Right.
So the question was that, was he planted by the Russians, and did they want Kennedy killed because Kennedy had humiliated them in 1962?
Right.
So I think Trump is trying to rake up these issues in the public domain because he's trying to build up a constituency of collateral pressure against Putin, because he
Right.
wants to end the Ukraine war.
Right. A constituency of collateral pressure to bring pressure on Putin to end the Russian war. That's a fascinating take there. But, Ambassador Vora, the fact is that it's all smoke and mirrors. You have all these conspiracy theories coming out, the JFK files being declassified. And of course, you have President Putin, who's ex-KGB himself. And the KGB has played some of the greatest spy games in all of human history, perhaps, the kind of spy capers that they've pulled off. But, give us a sense of where we're headed with American politics, with all of these declassifications coming out. Do you think that they will kind of intensify this war that America is currently seeing between the Democrats and the Republicans? It's a very nasty kind of political divide that we're seeing in the United States currently. Give us a sense of how these files will kind of add to that fire that's raging on in the US right now.
It's a society that is hopelessly divided at the moment. There's a
Right.
cleavage down the middle. There's no doubt about that. And somebody even said, I think it was Kishore Mehbubani, formerly of Singapore, who presently dean of the Singapore University, formerly ambassador, foreign secretary, who said
Yes.
that a country that cannot find an alternative to Joe Biden and Donald Trump is obviously disturbed. It's a very disturbed society.
Yes.
So let me add to this that you remember there used to be a fellow called Barack Hussein Obama who had promised to shut down Guantanamo within 8 days. 8 years later, he couldn't do anything with the deep state, torpedoed every effort that he made. Now,
Yes.
what I have been told by my friend who has researched this subject, some of the information is not even released to the president. If that is
Yes.
true, Donald Trump may not even know what is in those files himself. He couldn't have read them and said,
Right.
okay, guys, I'm ordering them to be released. He'd probably be as surprised as anybody else.
Yes.
What will happen is, it'll probably strengthen his reputation. And the Americans want to know, like anybody
Yes.
wants to know.
Right.
Will they find out? I doubt very much, sir. If the
Right.
documents are released, they will be heavily redacted. As we used to
Yes.
joke in the Indian bureaucracy, don't even leave a piece of toilet paper flying around. Somebody will pounce on it and open a file. So there was a joke at that time when I joined the service, or they'll even classify it. Here,
Yeah.
I believe that he's trying. I don't think he'll succeed. It's much too ingrained, the dark state. It's
Yes.
not going to enable him to function as he would like to function.
Absolutely. Interesting that a dark state as opposed to a deep state that Trump seems to be up against. But Iqbal Malhotra, it's been a decade since we declassified the Netaji files. We didn't find a lot in those files. Do you think the Indian government needs to start declassifying some serious material that we would need answers for? What's your estimation of this? What secrets are there, apart from the Henderson Brooks report, that we need some serious answers to?
Well, you mean about the Netaji files?
Yes.
Actually, the fact of the matter is this, that I made 3 films on Netaji, one for Discovery Channel,
Yes.
one for the History Channel, and one is running on Amazon in the US. Now, it's an established fact that there was no plane crash in Taipei, and it's an established fact that the Germans had a submarine base in Penang, and one of their submarines was caught on camera off the coast of Russia on the 30th of August 1945, and it was shot down. It shot down the aircraft that was doing the reconnaissance of that area, the American aircraft. So, and all the files about that event have been are still classified.
Right.
So, I mean, there's no doubt that if Netaji had really died in the plane crash, there would be evidence about it. There is no evidence about his death, and because there was no plane crash in Taipei on that day, and the Mukherjee Commission of Inquiry ascertained that fact.
Yes.
So the point is that if you have a will, you can get things. There is evidence lying in Vietnam, there's evidence lying in Japan, there's evidence
Yes.
lying in France, there's evidence lying in the UK and the US. It's not only in the Soviet Union, the erstwhile Soviet Union. So, I mean, when no Indian political party
Yes.
has been really interested in getting to the bottom of the truth, then what is there left to say? Because these questions will remain for the next 100 years, unless and until you set up a team, you go to all these in good faith to all these 6 countries, and you have a budget, and you go through their files, and you come
Yes.
up with the answers.
Absolutely.
And as Mr. Vora said, it's possible some of the files are redacted, but like there are always shadow files.
Yes.
Now, if you can get the government to open up their shadow files, then you'll know. I mean, you know that this gentleman, this Malayali gentleman who was number 2 to the Bose organization, Netaji's organization in Europe, Mr. Nambiar, he was brought back by RAW on the instructions of Mrs. Gandhi, I think
Yes.
in 1983 or 84. And why was he brought back from exile in Switzerland? He was living there, he had a companion, and he was in his mid-80s. What was the reason to bring him back?
Yes.
And
Indeed.
even if those files are declassified of 1984 and Mr. Nambiar's, and Nambiar was a Soviet agent, he was an agent for many intelligence organizations, including the West Germans. So
Yes.
you'll find answers there, but nobody is interested, and everybody's throwing red herrings in the
Nobody's
path of,
interested. Yes,
people
yes,
waiting
Iqbal.
for
I'm
the
afraid
whole
we're completely
history to
out
come
of
out.
time, Iqbal. But thanks for joining us while we're talking about the major move in the United States, that is the declassification of the John F. Kennedy, the Robert Kennedy, and of course the Martin Luther King files. Thank you very much for joining us, Ambassador Deepak Vora, Iqbal Malhotra.
Thank you very much.